Elon Musk's son is bullied at school. His next move leaves everyone stunned. It began quietly, just a few side glances, some whispered jokes in the hallway. At first, 12-year-old Xavier Musk tried to ignore it. He wasn't the kind of kid who liked drawing attention, despite his famous last name. But the school he attended, a prestigious academy tucked away in Northern California, was full of students who knew exactly who he was, and while most saw him as a curiosity, others saw him as a target. The bullying wasn't physical at first. It was subtle, crafted in the way only privileged children can manage. Mocking questions about his father, sarcastic jabs about rockets blowing up, or fake pity about him never seeing his dad because he's too busy buying planets. Xavier kept his head down. He focused on his assignments, avoided eye contact, and hoped it would stop. But it didn't. One morning, things escalated. A class project required team presentations. Xavier, as usual, put in extra effort, polished slides, clear speaking points, and thoughtful ideas. But when he stood in front of the class to present, a boy in the back row muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Did your dad pay someone to make your project too?" The room fell into awkward silence, followed by snickers. That was the moment something shifted. Not in Xavier, but in one of his teachers, Ms. Delgado, who had watched him quietly endure more than her reports could justify. That night, she did something unexpected. She sent an email. Not to the school board, not to the parents, but to a name at the bottom of Xavier's emergency contact form, Elon Musk. No one could have predicted what would happen next, but by the end of the week, not only the school, but the world would be watching. The email from Ms. Delgado didn't just get the attention of school administrators, it reached Elon Musk himself. He didn't respond right away, but when he did, it wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of issuing a statement or arranging a meeting with school officials, Elon called his son directly. "Xavier," Elon said calmly over the phone. "I heard what happened. I know it's tough, but listen to me carefully. This is an opportunity. The world's going to try and bring you down for a lot of reasons. You'll have to be stronger than they think you are." Xavier, sitting in his room, felt the weight of those words sink in. For the first time in days, the tension around him seemed to lift. He wasn't sure what his dad meant by opportunity, but Elon wasn't done. "What I want you to do," Elon continued, "is walk into school tomorrow and let them know who you really are. Not just who they think you are because of me, but because of who you are. Show them the power of being different, of thinking bigger than anyone could imagine, and do it in a way that they won't forget." Xavier sat back, thinking about the heavy advice. He hadn't expected this kind of conversation. He thought his dad might call the school or deal with it in a more traditional way. But instead, Elon had told him to face it head-on his own. The terms. There was no shield of fame here, just the encouragement to rise above it. The next morning, Xavier arrived at school, his mind spinning with what his father had said. He wasn't sure exactly what thinking bigger meant in this context, but he knew he couldn't let the bullies define him. So he did something that would completely turn the situation around. He took the stage in front of the entire school, ready to speak. The school auditorium was packed for the assembly, and Xavier stood at the front, his palms sweaty but his resolve firm. It was his turn to present his class project, but this time, he wasn't just going to go through the motions. He was about to do something unexpected, something that would challenge everything the bullies thought they knew about him. Xavier looked out at the sea of students, most of whom had either mocked him or silently watched as the bullying unfolded. A few snickered, some whispered behind their hands. But Xavier didn't flinch. Instead, he took a deep breath, adjusting the microphone. "Good morning, everyone," he started, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of quiet strength. "My name is Xavier Musk. Yes, I'm Elon Musk's son, but that's not what I want you to know about me. I want you to know who I am." He paused for a moment, glancing at the faces in the crowd, some curious, some skeptical. The air was thick with anticipation. What was he going to say? Would this just be another awkward presentation? I'm passionate about technology and space. I love coding and designing things that push the limits of what we can do. But what's most important to me right now, Xavier continued, his voice growing stronger, is showing you that no one gets to define who you are. Not by your name, not by what people expect from you, and not by any of the labels they put on you. Xavier shifted his stance, looking around the room. He had everyone's attention now. I'm here because I believe we should be able to be ourselves, even if we're different from the crowd. I'm not here to prove myself to anyone. I'm here to tell you that I'm more than just a name. I'm someone who can think, who can innovate, and who will keep moving forward, even when people try to bring me down. The silence fell over the room. Some students shifted uncomfortably, while others looked at Xavier with newfound respect. His words had cut through the noise, challenging the very things they thought they knew about him. And just as he finished his presentation, something even more unexpected happened. As Xavier wrapped up his speech, he noticed something that surprised him. The room wasn't filled with the same skepticism and mockery he had grown accustomed to. Instead, there was a quiet respect that began to form in the air. Some of the students, who had previously whispered behind his back or sneered at him in the hallways, were now watching him with open curiosity. The bullies were silent. It wasn't the usual reaction he expected. Normally, Xavier would have just been the quiet kid in the back of the room, dismissed as just Elon Musk's son. But today, something was different. Today, he'd stood up for himself, not just against the bullies, but against the assumptions that had shaped everyone's view of him. And then, something extraordinary happened. One of the popular students, Jake, who had been the loudest in mocking Xavier in the past, stood up from his seat. The room grew tense. Everyone held their breath, waiting for what he would say. Was he going to make fun of Xavier? Was he about to tear him down? Jake cleared his throat, and for a moment it felt like the entire auditorium was holding its collective breath. Then, in a voice louder than Xavier had ever heard him use, Jake spoke. "You know what, man? I'm sorry," he said, his tone a mixture of sincerity and surprise. "I never gave you a chance. I just assumed, like everyone else, that you were, well, just different because of your dad. But you're right, I don't know you. And honestly, I respect you for saying all that. I think we could all learn a thing or two from you." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else. Jake's words had struck a chord. It wasn't just an apology. It was an acknowledgement of Xavier's strength. And then, one by one, other students began to stand up. One girl, Maria, who had quietly sat in the back for years, said, "You've got guts, Xavier. I admire that." And another, Tom, added, "I think we all need to stop judging people based on their names or where they come from." It was as if Xavier's courage had sparked something deeper within the room. For the first time, students weren't just seeing him as the son of a billionaire. They were seeing him as someone who deserved respect, just like anyone else. By the time Xavier walked off the stage, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. But what happened next was something he didn't expect at all. As the days passed after Xavier's speech, the change in the school atmosphere was palpable. No one was the same. Not the students, not the teachers, and certainly not Xavier. The tension that had once surrounded him seemed to evaporate, replaced by an openness that no one had expected. The once critical students who had mocked him were now offering him respectful nods in the hallways. Conversations were shifting. Instead of talking about his father or his last name, they started to talk about Xavier's interests, his love for technology, his ideas, his dreams for the future. He was no longer just the kid whose father was Elon Musk. He was Xavier, the kid who had the courage to speak out and be himself. Xavier had unknowingly sparked a shift in perspective that rippled through the entire school. Teachers who had witnessed the entire incident took it upon themselves to start discussions on how to foster empathy and respect. The bullying that once ran rampant in the hallways had begun to subside. The students who had once formed cliques based on exclusivity were now breaking down barriers and including everyone, regardless of their background or what others expected of them. Xavier's newfound confidence didn't just inspire the students, it inspired the faculty too. One teacher, Mr. Sullivan, approached him after class one afternoon. "I've been teaching for 15 years, Xavier," he said, "and I've never seen anything like that. You didn't just change the dynamic in that room. You made us all think about how we treat others." For the first time, Xavier didn't feel like he was carrying a burden. He didn't feel like the weight of his last name was holding him back. He wasn't living in the shadow of who his father was. He was carving out his own identity, and people were finally seeing him for who he really was, a person with his own values, ambitions, and dreams. But just when Xavier thought it was all over, one more surprise came. The principal called him into her office a few weeks later. He walked in, unsure of what to expect. "Xavier," she began, "what you did that day, standing up for yourself and for others, has had a profound impact on this school. We've decided to start a new program focused on inclusivity and personal growth, and we'd like you to help lead it." Xavier was speechless. He had no idea how much his words had affected the school. "Me?" he asked, still processing the offer. The principal smiled. "You've already shown what leadership looks like. We need someone like you to help guide the next generation of students." Xavier accepted the offer to help lead the new program, though he still found it surreal. A few months ago, he was trying to survive each school day in silence. Now he was being asked to mentor others. It wasn't just about his name anymore. He had earned respect by being real, by confronting what everyone else ignored, and now he was using that voice for something bigger than himself. The school launched the initiative with a simple goal: build a culture where students saw each other beyond status, wealth, or assumptions. Xavier helped design workshops where kids could share stories about times they felt misunderstood, overlooked, or afraid to be themselves. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He just didn't want anyone else to feel as alone as he once did. His story, once a whispered topic, became a catalyst. Local news picked up on it, but Xavier declined interviews. He didn't want the spotlight. Instead, he used his position quietly, helping younger students find their voice, just like he had found his. One afternoon, after a session with a group of sixth graders, a girl stayed behind. She had barely spoken the entire hour. As the room emptied, she looked up at him with wide, nervous eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "I thought I was invisible. But when you talked about being judged for things you can't control, it felt like you were talking to me." Xavier didn't need a headline or recognition. That moment, those words, meant more than any public praise ever could. At home, Elon listened as Xavier told him about the changes at school. He didn't interrupt. He just nodded slowly, then smiled. "You didn't just survive, son. You led. That's something no amount of money can teach." And with that, Xavier finally understood what his father had meant when he called it an opportunity. He had taken the pain and turned it into purpose. He hadn't just changed how others saw him, he had helped change how they saw themselves. In the end, the boy they once mocked had become the one they looked up to, not because of his last name, but because of the strength he showed when it mattered most.